So, what are stories and songs? They're mnemonic devices. And mnemonic devices, they're just tactics and techniques that aid your memory. So, I'm watching this video of Dr. Lynn Kelly explaining how they use stories and songs to remember. And I'm like, go on. Because the first thing I thought was, yeah, it makes sense. I've been saying that for years. Stories and sayings and songs, they're easy to remember, and that makes them hard to lose. I don't know, I'd never thought of them as mnemonic devices. But it makes sense. Everyone knows that it's way easier to sing all the countries of the world than to recite a random list. United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, Republic Dominican, Cuba, Caribbean, Greenland, El Salvador too. Remember that song? I do. Everyone knows that stories and sayings and songs are sticky. They stick in your memory. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I before E, except after C. And I use that one a lot. Everyone knows that it's easy to remember repetition and rhythm and rhyme. Repetition and rhythm and rhyme. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. MISSI, SSIPPI. Everyone knows that it's easier to remember a motivational speaker's story than a boring sales talk. Everyone knows this. We know this, we know this, we know this. We just don't think of myths this way. So, to Sarah Boothify Dr. Kelly, one way of encoding information into myths is by turning animals around you into these mythical, magical characters in your story. So you exaggerate their qualities, you emphasize their features, and you give them these personalities that are larger than life. And they go on amazing adventures doing all these, wildly outrageous, unrealistic deeds. Because, like Dr. Kelly says, it makes the characters and the myth more vivid. That makes them more memorable. And I'm like, ooh, tell me more. So I go digging into other sources. I find out it all means something. Even the places they go means something. And there's another really interesting way that you encode information into myths. And it explains something that we don't get about myths. But hold on. I'll tell you about that in a minute. First, I want to Sarah Boothify a story that's encoded with information so that you know what I'm talking about. Okay? So here is just a little snippet of the Dreamtime story of Buri Buri that I heard from Ray Ingray. The old people lived far in the east, but the land became no good, so they have to leave. But they only have small canoes. So they steal a baranga, a big vessel, from Buri Buri, and they row away. And Buri Buri is angry, and so he chases after them. And after days and days of pursuit and epic fights and non-stop rowing, when everyone's too tired to row anymore, a little man named Guawala says, "Let me row. I'll get us there." And as he's rowing, he says, "Look at my big arms. I've got strong arms. I'll row us to where we're going." But while he's boasting, Guala starts growing fur and big funny ears and a big black nose. But he doesn't stop rowing because he doesn't want Buri Buri to catch them. And so he rows and he rows and he rows. And when they finally reach land, Guala, he's crying, ashamed of how he looks. And he's so worn out, he climbs the nearest tree and hugging it, he falls asleep. Now, Guala is a real animal. They're little, with big strong arms like Guala. They have big black noses, big funny ears, and a piercing cry. And they really do sleep in trees 20 hours a day in Australia. What is a Guala? Guala, Guala, Koala, 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 koala. It's a koala. So do you see how that works? Now, because you know this story that's packed with all this powerful imagery, you can identify a koala in real life, even if you've never seen one before. And that story makes that information easy to remember. That's why myths are such a powerful way of passing on information. I focused specifically on Guala, but by leaving out parts of the story, you lose the vital information in what those other characters and the events mean. And they're really interesting, actually. So I put links in the description for you to hear the whole story from Ray. Now, while I was looking into the ways that people use myths to remember, I kept finding more and more reasons why myths are so magical. Myths make information more memorable because you don't just tell the story. You sing it, you dance it, you chant it. And remember, a little bit ago I said that there's another way to encode information into myths. And it explains something that we don't really get about myths. Well, what I'm talking about are the repeating lists. Let me explain. I was reading about when they were collecting myths in the late 1800s and early 1900s from these islanders on Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island. They seemed a little disenchanted with how often the islanders chanted the entire list of names of food, the entire list of these names of places around the island. They were like, ugh, you can tell. You can tell. You can tell they all sort of felt disenchanted by the chanting. And so you can imagine that all of that repetition, it does get boring or aggravating if you don't know why storytellers chant over and over and over. I didn't get it. I remember reading Sumerian myths and being like, ugh, another item list? Skip. But now, I understand why it is that way. And so that little insight makes me smile. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh, I get it. I know why they're doing this. So why do they repeat these lists? Now that you know that myths are mnemonic devices, doesn't it make sense what they're doing? Chanting is how they remember. And that repetition, it's no different than the way that we repeat the chorus of our songs today. Except, that our songs aren't really conveying information that's vital to our survival. Not the way that mythic story songs do. While I was looking into the ways that people use myths to remember, I kept finding more and more reasons why myths are so magical. Gumaroy Newman, an Aboriginal Australian from the Guguya, Waka Waka, and Gamilaroi nations, he taught me that even the way you sing the song means something. But I'll let him show you what I'm talking about.
They are the melodies of the ocean and the mountains in far north Queensland. My people, because the landscape moves like that. So like my brother Turtle Tukabi was saying, inside of the songs you have information.
How brilliant is that? What an awesome way of encoding information into your myths, your story songs, which is kind of like sending a message in more than one language. So what I'm saying here is that myths are encoded with layers and layers and layers of meaning. And some of it is information you wouldn't even know is there if you just read the story. Because the information, it's not explicitly stated in words, just like with these songs that we just heard. It's implied. Do you see why mythic story songs are so magical? They're doing so many things at the same time. They're mnemonic devices. They stick in your memory. They encode information in multiple unforgettable ways. They convey meaning on more than one level, just by the way that you perform them, as one example. They send messages implicitly. They capitalize on the natural way that the human mind stores memory. They help you install information in a way that makes it easy to recall later. And every time you repeat that song and retell that story, you're reminding yourself of all the information hidden inside. And we don't think of myths this way. But all these magical qualities make myths the perfect way to pass on information. And that's the point, right? The whole reason that you've made up these myths, the whole reason you tell them this way, is to help you remember everything you know. Remember? But wait, there's more to the story.